Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to A Backwards Glance. I'm Sid Mickle. Today we're going to take a little bit of a different approach to the storytelling. We're going to have a little bit more of a serious tone. And that's because we're approaching a very important anniversary of a tragedy in this country, the 9/11 disaster. As many of you know, I flew during my career almost every week. It was nothing for me to be on an airplane 6-7 weeks in a row and fly all across the country. It is a troubling thing when I sit down and I listen to some of the TV coverage and the audio coverage from inside the airplanes. It definitely takes me back to some of the scarier things I was involved in flying, and nothing I ever experienced even came close to this kind of horror. I've been on airplanes where a person died on the airplane and I was asked to help try to revive them. I've had people have epileptic seizures in the seat just behind me and try to help them. I've been in dozens of go-arounds. Landed in Jacksonville one night with a shredded tire that we suffered on a takeoff in Dallas and continued on to Jacksonville. There have been a lot of times that I have been very afraid on an airplane. My boss and I flew through a tornado belt coming out of Fort Lauderdale back to Jacksonville one day in an old DC-6. And it's the only time I've ever had vertigo. I thought we were going to die. I looked out the window wanting to see that last moment in my own eye. Obviously, that was not the case. But as we think back to 9/11, I'll share this with you. I was a sales manager at Outer Circle Products, and one of my customers was the Avon Corporation. Avenue of the Americas near Park Street. And I had an appointment on Tuesday, 9/11, for 4 buyers. I still have the ticket. Now, I would not have been involved in any of the early morning activities. I was scheduled to arrive just after 10 a.m. But I would have been in the entire mess that air travel was that day. But just so happens on Monday, my representative called and said, hey, 3 people have canceled. We only have 1 appointment. Do you want to reschedule? And I, of course, said yes. Let's just do it at a different date. Now, one other thing is, my wife, Wendy, is a New Yorker, and she was visiting her parents over that weekend and through the end of the week. As the day unfolded, we were living in LaGrange. I was in my separate office. My phone rang, and it was Wendy, and asking me if I was watching TV. Of course, I didn't think about that. I was busy at work. So I turned it on and I started seeing what was happening. And I immediately moved back down to our house and turned on a TV that I could see better and just began to absorb things that are not easy to absorb. Everything about that day is really soul crushing to me. It's one of those things that I cannot functionally process in my mind, of being in the Twin Towers and going through that kind of horrible experience. Some people died instantly. Other people's died slowly. And some people died in the only way they could escape horrible torture, by jumping from a 100-story plus building. There's nothing pleasant about any reflection on this. And I'll also add this. The people that write in and get on the internet and talk about scheduled demolitions of buildings make me sick. They really insult the memories of those people who perished, the innocent, and those people who perished sacrificing their lives trying to help people. So I have a special, absolute anger at those kind of conversations. As we sat through that day and we watched death happen live on TV, probably the most unprecedented event ever covered by the media, it just is burned into my memory. And I do watch it repeatedly because it's something I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget any of the details about it. We went through that day, and I can remember my cell phone almost melting down as people called me. They knew I traveled. Some of my family knew I was going to New York, and I picked up telephone calls with people near hysterics, family members wanting to know, was I okay? Why didn't I answer the first call? Things like that. So it was like a lot of people, I'm sure, went through on the outside, on the boundaries of that kind of disaster. I can't even imagine being involved in it. It was just one of the most horrific experiences of my life. When the week settled down and air traffic began to return, I think Wendy had been scheduled to come back on a Wednesday and couldn't come back until a Saturday morning. And I drove to the Atlanta airport, which I'd flown in and out of hundreds and hundreds of times. And it was this unbelievable, eerie, deathly silent place. Airplanes parked everywhere. And I went in, there were no crowds. There were a handful of people. And if you know Atlanta, you go to the lobby area there, the main ticket counter area, and you wait for that escalator to come up where plane passengers are coming up from the trains. And there would be a trickle. There'd be a carload and nothing else. And there'd be another carload and nothing else. And one thing that particularly sticks in my mind is no one said a word until the people came up, and there were a lot of hugs and a lot of really holding on to people tight. It's just one of those things that I think everyone was still reeling from emotionally and probably still trying to process. And that day when Wendy returned home and I was able to finally see her, and we talked about how crazy it was and how upsetting it was. Her dad was a volunteer fireman in Mahopac, and a very big and active fire department, and they knew an awful lot of fire company people. There are people that were involved in that horrible, deadly day, and some of those people spent months afterward helping with the cleanup. It was an unbelievable, long, and torturous journey that is not over. And I'll tell you one other thing that I finally was able to do, and I had hesitated to go do it because in my earlier travel days, one of my best friends, who was at the time my boss, took me to New York. I think it was the first or second time, it may have been the very first time, to New York. And Paul had been a detail manager. He had worked that area with sales reps who visited doctors all over Manhattan. He knew New York City like the back of his hand. He picked me up at LaGuardia, and we proceeded to drive to every place, every tourist attraction, every item that I've ever heard of. And one of those things was the World Trade Center. And we parked in front of the Marriott Hotel and got out and walked around right in front of it. We could just park on the sidewalk. If you think about what happened years later, it's an incredible thing to know that you remember it as it was, and then you see it in that horrible, distressing, and deadly time. It was something that always bothers me. Unless I'm remembering this wrong, we went past a famous sign that is seen in a lot of the 9/11 videos. It just shows that they've created about it. And it's a crumpled up sign that says U-turn World Trade Center. And maybe I'm creating this in my mind, but I don't think so. I think that's exactly how we arrived there. We went to that area, made our U-turn, and parked on the sidewalk across from the building. It's just an eerie, kind of haunting thing to think about. This past December, my daughter and my grandson and I went to New York, and we did touristy stuff. We did stuff that I had done before and that they hadn't done before. And we did some things I had never even contemplated, like climbing the Empire State Building on the inside. All 86 floors to the last from the very upper level, the outside observation deck. But we made our way after a couple days down to the 9/11 Museum. And we walked around the footprint areas where the building stood. They're now fountains. And I can remember walking around and recognizing people's names from TV and from documentaries. And you see those names and it just immediately takes you back to that moment. And then you hear the stories of the people and how they were killed that day and how some sacrificed their lives very heroically. It was a very sobering time just walking around outside. And now it's a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous park with these twin tower footprint fountains running all the time. Then we went inside, and it got real. I spent 2 hours there fighting tears, trying not to choke up when we just tried to exchange words, watching a few videos, seeing the absolute guts of that building, the walls where the foundation supports were bolted through rock, seeing the real base of the World Trade Center, and knowing what happened that day, and knowing what happened to human beings in that place that day. Sobering isn't quite the word I would use. It's depressing. It's heartbreaking. But I remember watching everyone in that building, probably 200 people, 250 people. There was very little conversation. There were a lot of people weeping. There were a lot of people who just were struggling to get through the museum. And then you go by and you hear the personal stories and you see the pictures, and then you start seeing the equipment. And you start seeing the damage that was done just to inanimate objects, fire trucks, police cars. And you realize the same thing happened to people. Everyday, real people who for some reason were killed that day. Everything they knew, everything they hoped for, dreamed of, loved, and cared about was wiped away for an absurd and insanely impossible for me to understand reason. Now, there may be some of you who can have a great long political or geopolitical conversation about that. I can't and I won't. I don't have that ability in me. I think about the people, and that's it. Well, we made our way through, and it took us, thank goodness, my grandson was old enough to understand it was somber, but wasn't negatively affected by it. But my daughter and I were pretty much impacted deeply. And as night came and my grandson went to sleep, she and I had a lot of conversation about the day and how it's very important to remember everything about 9/11 and to not let passing political fads and idiots on the internet or other crazy experiences dim or dilute the memory of people who have fallen who were true heroes. And there were an awful lot of them. So I am really sorry that today is kind of a downer storytelling time. But I think it's important. I think it's important for us to sometimes just stop in our daily lives and our daily busy work and family and work and fun, and think about things that are really bigger than all of us. Think about things that are very important to us as a nation, us as a people. I hope everyone will remember 9/11, and I hope we can do things that will prevent anything like that from ever happening to any people. I don't care who they are. I don't want anybody to suffer like those people suffered that day, and a lot of people suffer now. So next week we will come back and we'll do a little bit more of the lighter side, some fun stories. Hopefully we'll pick up our mood here. But as we do that, somewhere in the back of my mind, there will always be that ticket that says New York LaGuardia, 10:01 arrival, 9/11/2001. Hope you have a great week. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.